Everybody's sitting on one side of the room.
Delpines.
I don't. Oh. Is she not gonna be here?
No, Cheryl.
All right, the time is 7 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pileski.
Here.
Trustee Della Penna.
Here.
Trustee Domke.
Here.
Trustee Forsythe. Here. Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Perkowski.
Here.
Trustee Trejo.
Here. We have a quorum. We'll now move on to presentation of the prepared agenda. Trustee Perkowski.
I have two motions I would like to make, Mayor Plesky. One, I move that we remove item 13B from the agenda.
And what's your second? Well, we can just do it as one motion. That's fine.
And then the second is to move executive session to item 21.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. Is there a motion then to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. We'll now move on to Village Board public comment. Anyone wishing to provide a comment on a topic or an agenda item may address the Village Board during public comment and public hearing segments of the Village Board agenda by submitting comments in advance or using our online form. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments submitted in advance?
Yes, we have two. The first one is from Vicky Zinni of 226 Park Lane, and she writes, I am 65 years old. As I talk with Roselle friends, we are noticing that there is a very limited supply of condos/coach homes without outrageous association fees. There is also a limited variety of styles to pick from to own as we age, and we don't want to leave Roselle. Please consider us when making decisions to develop on the Trinity Senior Daycare plot of land. You may have some other location in mind, but I haven't heard of it mentioned in any of the meetings. Some friends have already left Roselle even after over a year of search.
Thank you so much.
The second one is from Maria Principato of Roselle. And she writes, ladies and gentlemen of the Village Board, I'd like to address a growing concern in our community, speeding on our block. The block of East Woodworth Place, located between South Prospect and Rush Street, is home to over 12 children ranging in ages from 7 to 13. These children are the heart of our block, and they spend their time playing together, riding bikes, walking dogs, and visiting each other's houses. As we enter the summer months, the children will be out and about more frequently. While their energy and enthusiasm are wonderful to see, it also means that we must ensure their safety. That is why I'd like to propose the installation of 2 slow watch for children signs on East Woodworth Place. One sign preferably on the road verge of United Methodist near Rush Street, and another at the end of the block near South Prospect. Implementing such signage would serve as a reminder to drivers passing through to our neighborhood to exercise caution and reduce their speed all year long. By taking this proactive step, we can enhance the safety of our children and instill a sense of security among the residents. The visibility of these signs will serve as a visual cue, urging drivers to slow down and prioritize the well-being of our children. I kindly request that the Village Board seriously considers this proposal and takes the necessary steps to implement 2 signs. Thank you for your attention and your dedication to our community's welfare. Kind regards, Maria Principato.
Well, I appreciate the sentiment. I know this is that time of year, especially as school comes out, a lot more kids will be out in the neighborhoods and it's nice weather. So it's there's an urge for speed sometimes on our streets. I know the board did approve in its budget 2 mobile kind of speed tracking signs that will be rolling out to implement to help with some of these things. I think sometimes with signage, it gives a false sense of security that people are actually going to abide by the street signs. We know that they don't. Enforcement is only as good as we have officers there at the time of it. So I think it's super important to report incidences as they occur. And then I'll just ask that, the police department just evaluate this request and see if signage would be necessary as proposed, or if there's anything that we want to do maybe from a safe driving campaign this summer to evaluate these specific concerns. So appreciate the comment. Any members of the public here tonight that wish to address the board? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Dale King. I live on Rosemont Avenue in Roselle. I'm not going to bore you guys with what I've already said. Everybody's heard it, but I just have two questions. One is anybody driven on Rosemont to look on our street?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. The second is, if you look on the east block of Rosemont, there was 4 right there where the sewer lines collapsed. It happens to be 2 houses on this side, directly across 2 houses on that side. Now, doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that there's something wrong, something seriously wrong. Because both they're I'm calling them ditches. Both their ditches and everything, I went down there when it was heavy rain. They were filled with water, just like mine, just like my neighbors. And I looked on my street today, and right in front of my house, it's cracking all the way across the street. Now, what's going to happen? I don't know.
Did you say east side or do you?
The east block of Rosemont.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just the east block of Rosemont. So, I'm baffled that nobody can figure out that 2 houses here, 2 houses here, right across from each other, you got 4 collapses. That's just not coincidence. That's not coincidence at all. That is erosion under the ground due to the fact we don't have storm sewers. That's really about all I have to say, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Any other members of the public wish to address the board at this time? All right, then we will move on to officials and staff reports. Under mayor, I just want to remind everyone that we've got the Rose Parade coming up before our next meeting. So June 4th, hopefully everyone can join us out there. Kickoff is at 2 p.m. So I know we're really excited to have that summer kind of kickoff event for us occur. So looking forward to celebrating all things pop art, and we'll have some fun giveaways for everyone from that side of things. And then also, obviously, this is Memorial Day weekend coming up as well. And so I know the VFW will be having a memorial ceremony at the park on the day. So if you have time, it's always a moving tribute, I think. And they also rededicate new bricks at that. So if you are available to join, please, I'll see you there. Other than that, that's the only report I have tonight. Any village trustees have a report? Seeing none, village clerk.
No report.
Village attorney.
No report.
Village administrator. Treasurer's report. Let's talk about the April financials.
Good evening. Yes, this is the April financials are in the packet tonight. I just wanted to say a few words about what's going on in the month of April. The general fund ended the month at revenues over expenditures of $759,000 through the year so far, so through April, which is 33% of the year. Continuing to see major revenues perform better than budget. You'll see that on, I believe it's page 2 of my report. So most of the major revenues are performing better than we expected. Currently expenditures are at 26% of budget. So as I said, we're 33% and we're only at a quarter of expenditures. But of course, through the year, things are not even, a little bit cyclical, but so far so good as we are moving through. Water sewer operating is within budget. There we're reporting about $577,000 revenues over expenditures. But again, as we mentioned, when we increased the rates, the water that we are purchasing from DuPage Water Commission it will be increasing. On page 10, I've been showing the permits and daily fees for the community. I kind of updated that chart for y'all just to show 2019 and then 2022 and 2023 are starting to get very cluttered with all the years in there. So really that's just an effort to show you pre-pandemic and then where we're at today. So daily fees are higher and continue to be higher than they were in 2019, but of course, permits are still low. But if you walk by, you'll see, a lot of the lot is, especially on the south side, is full during the middle of the week. On pages 15 and 16, I added the balance sheet in the income statement for the General Capital Projects Fund. As we continue the discussion of infrastructure, I wanted to include these. I just felt it was important to enhance the report by including the balance sheet in any income statement. And then pages 26, 27, and 28, I display the utility taxes that are received in that fund, just so you can see the trends from 2016 through 2023. And that's all I have for my report. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions from the board? Wayne?
Well, the debt ceiling that's going on in the national politics, what would that mean to Roselle if they didn't pass the debt ceiling? How does that affect us?
Well, the thought is that the economy would come to a standstill. There'd be layoffs. People wouldn't be able to borrow. Notes would be called around the world. So that is never going to be a good thing for the village. I don't think we're going to get that far.
I hope not.
Historically, it's done as a negotiating ploy. But I don't think
vulnerable. Where are we vulnerable in that, other than the economy?
Well, the economy. I mean, if we go into a deep recession, we'd be coming to the board at the next, when we do that update, saying, just like we did in 08 and 09, things are looking bleak, and we may have to do something, but it's all theoretical at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, they say stuff, everything's going to collapse, and nothing ever does, except in 08. But it's something that we're watching, and we'll, as we get closer to that cliff, we'll see. But I'm hard pressed to think that either side would want that to happen.
And the other thing is, if interest rates go up, do we ever renegotiate our debt?
If they go up, no, our debt is pretty low at this point. The only thing we issued recently is
Not our debt, I'm sorry, our investments.
Oh, well,
Where we would get a higher return.
yeah, we're always, as things mature, and we've laddered some of our investments. So, they're fixed. We hold everything to maturity. We really can't be playing the market, so to speak.
Okay.
But as things come up, we try to get out to the 3, 4, 5-year mark. We have people that we consult with that give us the best option for holding our money. And most of our money is in, our reserves. So it may not be needed for 3 to 5 years. So that's where we're really hitting the market.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Tom? Thank you so much. And we're almost wrapping up audit, right? So we'll have a fun audit report coming up
Almost.
soon.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So we'll have the audit probably at the first meeting of July instead of the second meeting in June.
Okay.
Most firms, as I understand it around the country, are needing CPAs. So if you know anybody that is young and they're going to go to school, make sure they become CPAs because we need them. But yes, we're wrapping up the audit. We just got a draft today. So.
Great. Looking forward to it. No better way to celebrate Independence Day than an audit. So thank you. We'll move on to unfinished business. First, we have the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, or non-controversial in nature and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items. Tonight, we have presentation approval of the village board minutes of May 8th, 2023. Adopted resolution authorizing the execution of agreement by and between the Village of Roselle and Prescient Development Incorporated. Adopted resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement by and between the Village of Roselle and RPM Building and Code Incorporated. Adopted resolution authorizing the village administrator to sign an agreement for professional services between the Village of Roselle and HR Green Incorporated for plumbing inspections. Adopted resolution authorizing the village administrator to sign an agreement for professional services between the Village of Roselle and HR Green Incorporated for building and plumbing inspection services for the Metro 19. And adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement by and between the Village of Roselle and SEIU Local 73 Part-Time Firefighters Union. Is there a motion to approve? So moved. There's a second. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe. Aye. Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Prokowski.
Aye. That motion carries. We'll now move on to community development in the absence of Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Delapenna, could you cover?
Sure. I would like to make a motion to pass an ordinance granting a request for a zoning variation from Village Code for the property commonly known as 508 East Turner Avenue, Roselle, Illinois.
Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion? I'll also, oh, yes, Wayne.
I want to just ask, when I look at the layout, the house already is within 5 feet of the lot line. Is it because we're putting an attached garage on that it has to be reevaluated?
So the house is more than 5 feet from the property line. It's attaching the garage to the house, that requires the variance.
But they're not moving anything closer to the property line.
Correct.
So it's just because it now becomes a part of the house that now it has to be. Nobody spoke out against it, so, okay.
Yep.
Any other discussion from the board? I'll note that we'll start to see more of these at the board. This is a part of the zoning revisions that we made earlier this year. So again, the village board has final say on these as opposed to that going through the zoning board of appeals as we prior did. So streamlining and consolidating kind of roles and whatnot. So I know we will have an exciting training session coming up. So those are great questions, Wayne, and we'll hopefully be able to answer all those and more coming up soon. So
Exciting.
if there's no other debate from the board, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye. And that motion carries. That's it for community development tonight. We have nothing under administration, fire, or police, but public works. Trustee Prokowski.
Thank you, Mayor Polinsky. I'd like to move adoption of a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement by and between the Village of Roselle and Garland DBS Incorporated Joint Purchasing Cooperative, MICPA, and Omnia.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
That motion carries.
And I do not have anything else, Mayor Pulaski.
Thank you so much. Move on to finance. Trustee Delapena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable list for May 22nd, 2023 in the amount of $1,438,827.57.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Della Penna.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. We'll now move on to new business. So we'll first start off with a presentation from Tesca and Ansel Glink regarding the proposed outline for a Lake Street corridor zoning overlay and provide feedback to the working group. So I'll have Community Development Manager Karen Bricks do the introduction.
So Michael Blue from Tesca, who we're all very familiar with, and Kurt from Ansel Glink are here to go over sort of where we've been as part of the Lake Street Corridor zoning overlay projects, and then the next steps. So we're kind of in the home stretch of drafting all the sort of us, Hanover Park, Bloomingdale, and the county kind of battling it out and agreeing to terms and conditions for this kind of thing to happen. So they're going to go into more detail.
Thank you so much. How can it be an introduction like that?
I'm going to take issue with the phrase battling it out, but we can talk about that another time. Mayor, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be with you again to talk about zoning. Everybody's always excited, I know. But very pleased to be here with you and talk about this project, which, yes, has been going on for a while between the pandemics and the need to coordinate between different communities. We've been working on this for a bit, but working with it with our colleagues from CMAP who are represented here tonight. Want to acknowledge their presence and our appreciation for their help in getting this through. The idea of the overlay, am I using this right?
Yep, you're good. Just got to point it right over here in the corner.
That just seems rude. So I'll talk a little bit about the overview of the project and then the approach, and then the summary. We'll talk about the breadth of it, not the depth of it. But that's a lot of that's described in the memo that I saw was in the packet and the draft of the document. So in terms of overview, I'll figure this out. What were we trying to accomplish? And again, the communities in DuPage County, which Karen mentioned, have had issues on Lake Street, right, with any number of things. The intent was to resolve some zoning and land use conflicts that exist out there. The other, which is a big one, is to incentivize new development, right, is to have more modern zoning available that could encourage new development to happen and create consistency. One of the things we talked about with the steering committee, which had representatives from each of the jurisdictions, was that, this is not just pieces of 4 communities. This is a corridor and everybody is vested in it. And we know that's why you were involved with it to begin with. What were the findings? First of all, we found in reviewing the planning documents and talking with the organizations that every town has got a pretty well established set of goals and objectives for the area, and that they generally align. Part of the issue again out there, as I sort of mentioned, is that there is what I'll kindly refer to as an eclectic development pattern. The area was platted in the county a very long time ago. It's got these long, narrow lines. It's just difficult to develop. And the idea is that through some zoning help and some increase in the quality of development out there, that could be addressed. So this is what eclectic looks like in a map. This is the existing land use that's out there in standard land use colors, right? The yellow is residential and the dark red is commercial, and you see there's some industrial in there. And the boundaries that are on there, I cannot even begin to describe for you, but Roselle is indicated on there and stretches mostly through the middle and northern portion on the north side of the street with a little bit on the south. We tried to kind of group this together, right? So it was a little less confusing. Whether we did it or not, I'll leave that to you. But the idea here is to acknowledge that there are different types of characters. There are different areas of development patterns. So while it is one corridor, it's got these different feels to it. And next time you drive by, you'll think of this map, trust me, and you'll understand what we're talking about. But this really presented the challenge of how to deal with zoning for the area. It's been a while, but about a year ago, we had an open house. We invited residents of the community and business owners. I would tell you the business owners were concerned that their type of business not be zoned away, right? Which is something that we certainly took to heart and is very logical. And the neighbors were primarily folks from Keeneyville who had no interest in becoming incorporated or becoming added to a community, which has been an established character out there for a long time. So there was not a lot of the meeting confirmed what we really knew. We talked to some stakeholders, some folks that are involved in the area and understand it well. Bottom line here was this notion that the corridor is a good place to do business. There's high traffic counts. The corridors communities are well established and work well and are easy to work with. But that the character of the area, which is why you all decided to be involved with this, some of the less desirable land uses that are there, created a character where people were not necessarily inspired to open a business. And again, I know I would expect a lot of this is familiar to you because this is why you started this. It's always good for us to go through the process and confirm that that's what's going on out there. We also talked to some of the residents because just as the communities, a lot of the residents had concerns about code enforcement, made worse by the fact that it's not clear who to call or what town you live in. And we heard from all the staffs that they hear from people who don't necessarily live in their own community asking for support and help. But we had a really good conversation with a couple of folks who helped us understand what those code enforcement specifics are. And we'll get into that in just a tiny bit, but that helped us focus the ordinance to give the municipalities and the county the tools they needed to address those issues, a lot of which they have, but now it's consistent across. In terms of the approach, we kind of had these 5 ideas top of mind. One was the notion of local control. I would tell you, quite frankly, a lot of the knockdown dragouts. No, a lot of the contention, a lot of the concern was how are we, let's say Roselle, how much of our control are we going to give up in this process? Are we going to give Hanover Park or Bloomingdale a vote in the zoning that we do here, which was part of the discussion we had? The answer is clearly no, right? So we talked about the idea to share information, but no, there was no, and we considered this for a while. There was no grand plan commission to be shared across boundaries and whatnot. The idea was that local municipalities, each of the communities and the county would manage their own zoning as they have been, but with this new set of common regulations, which is this set of overlay groupings that you see in the next idea. The second key approach was code enforcement, which I mentioned. The third is this set of common regulations. not that are imposed, but are as a fallback, as a tool for each of the communities to use. And the third is an intergovernmental agreement that would spell this out, and Ansel Link will be putting together a draft of that. So in terms of the summary, there's one slide for each section, just so you know what's in the document. So these are the 8 sections that are in it. So it's not so different than you would find in, I don't know, like a zoning code that you just adopted. And so the idea of intent and purpose, as we talked about with your code, districts have intent and purpose statements, and this is the one that's included here. And you can see that it talks about common standards, consistent development, consistent enforcement, mitigating adverse impacts. These kind of things are common in codes, but very specific to the needs of the corridor. The first section is the administrative provisions, the how does this get done. In terms of notice, again, the idea of local communities following their own procedures is in place. Roselle is not going to be required to send a formal notice to Bloomingdale and to Hanover Park and the county. But what we talked about is an opportunity for the staffs to more formally share information, right? The county in particular does this when something near or on your borders happens, they will send you the information. So we talked about the code spelling out how, or the overlay spelling out how this would happen. We talked about this corridor committee, the steering committee, continuing to meet on an ongoing basis in 2 ways. One is that every 6 months or so, administration and elected officials would get together to be in touch and to talk about needs for the corridor. How is it continuing to meet our common needs? And that staff would meet perhaps quarterly for a more day-to-day kind of operational purpose. And then for land use controls, again, it spells out the processes that are part of zoning here. Nonconformities was a big point of discussion. How would nonconformities be addressed? For the most part, it became clear that the most effective way and the most comfortable way for everybody to deal with this was that local jurisdictions nonconformities would be addressed or would be followed. In terms of land use, what we did is we created groupings. And if anybody's having trouble sleeping, I can talk about this in grand detail. But the idea is this was a way to put everybody's code together. So in terms of the land uses, which are there, I realize in tiny print, but you can see them more spelled out in the draft of the document. The idea was to create these common categories that would not be intended to necessarily exclude many uses at all, but might turn some into special uses. Right. So this is the sort of thing that we spent a lot of time going back and forth on. And we got a little bit hung up, quite frankly, initially that these didn't match up with everybody's ordinance. And it took us a while to kind of get beyond that and understand, yeah, you know what, that is what's going to happen. But we're dealing with a whole corridor. And we all worked on your ordinance together. And I can tell you that these uses are generally consistent. And I would invite you to spend some time with this and look at it. If you have any questions, get in touch with Karen and she can relay messages and we can certainly fill in details and refine as we go along. In terms of the bulk standards, the how tall, the how far back from the property line and so on and so forth, couple of things. One, in terms of residential use, we effectively adopted the county's R4 because the single family residential that's out there is currently in the county and built to this standard. So maintaining that consistency, as we talked about with Roselle's ordinance, the intent is not to create a lot of nonconformities. So this was a sound approach to bulk. In terms of parking, what we did was include a number of best practices. Again, each of the jurisdictions had some, or in some cases, most of these. I know yours does. But the idea was to create these same sort of ideas. And these are just modernized. This is the same thing we did when we talked about your code, the idea of bicycle parking and visitor parking and EV stations and these sorts of things. So by modernizing consistently across, the code can help create a better form of development. Same thing with landscaping and buffering. These are all the pieces that go into it. And as you can see, some of them are applied through the overlay. Some of them defer to the local jurisdiction, and some of them, in particular, the best management practices, which is use of native plantings and such, is encouraged. It's not the sort of thing that is embraced in every community. And so it's in here as an educational tool in the hope that it'll be applied. In terms of general provisions, I probably told this joke when we talked about your code, but the general provisions section is sort of the junk drawer from your kitchen of the zoning ordinance. It's whatever else needs to be covered. And so again, these are things that most of the codes have, but just to be sure we're all working from the same page, we added ideas like outdoor storage, trash enclosures, lighting, temporary uses, the things that are impactful in terms of the character and appearance of the corridor. There are now some standards that are consistent throughout. Signage. Signage is actually not all that bad on the corridor. But what we did was we addressed one issue, which has been a concern, is that to the extent there are billboards out there, those are going to be amortized. The idea is to amortize them over a long period. We haven't talked about what that is yet, but that's kind of the most logical legal approach to take. And if there are hard questions about that, I'll defer to Kurt. But so the idea of amortizing monument signs was on the list. The other idea was to find the balance between what signs we were going to allow and what signs we weren't. The details are in there, but I would point out just a couple of things. One is that the sign that you see the example of in the corner there is technically a pole sign, even though it's on 2 poles. There's a bunch of these signs out there. If you drive up and down the corridor, some of them are actually really nice, right? And so in prohibiting pole signs, we didn't want to chase away this actually rather attractive and supportive sign. So we created a new category. And so these signs will be permitted, even though in some ordinances, you'll see them defined as a pole sign. The other type of sign that's going to propose to be prohibited in the overlay are box signs. So when a sign gets plugged onto a wall, there's different ways of attaching it. And the box sign is the most, let's call it, historic version of doing this. And these don't necessarily age well. And these are ones that over time would be phased out. The other part of the code will be the definitions. Key to good enforcement is to have good definitions. So that's all that needs to be noted here. So with that, in terms of next steps, we'll be visiting Hanover Park June 1st, Bloomingdale June 12th. We were at the county you weren't there, earlier in May. Met with the development committee. And so we want to do this introduction of what is very close to, as Karen said, is the final product. Once we have shared it with everybody, to the extent there are no objections over specific items, we'll draft a version of it and then bring it back to the steering committee and then you for adoption. So appreciate the chance to work with you on this exciting project and to share with you a little bit about where we are, and glad to answer any questions. Like I said, if you've got any details or if you're reading it later and have any, please get in touch with Karen and she'll get in touch with us.
Great. Thank you so much. Any questions from the board? Trustee Domke.
Yeah, I just have 2. And it's a great report. I mean, I know what you're getting at. It's good to have some action on that corridor, which is the longest road in the United States, you understand. Route 20 is the longest road in the United States. So if you want to market it, there you go.
Barry?
Okay. Second thing I wanted to mention, is the state involved, because that's a state highway, and Bloomingdale has a 4-lane divided all the way up to Rodenberg Road, or in that area. Will that be, do you have to have your setbacks with the idea that possibly that's going to become a freeway or a 4-lane divided?
We talked to the state and they said that they have no plans, nothing in the works, certainly not in their 5-year plan. That's not in there right now. The folks that we talked to said we don't envision it in the near future, essentially not to incorporate it at this point. Doesn't mean it won't come up later, but it was not in their thinking.
Yeah, maybe that's first looking far forward too far, I guess. But Lake Street is a pretty valuable artery. And then the second question I have, if I may, on one of the maps you showed residential in yellow, and then there was another map that showed that same residential where adjacent to Lake Street it was in like commercial. Are you thinking that some of those residentials are going to turn over into commercial because of the overlay and the plans for the corridor?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. There are spots of the corridor, as you've probably seen, where there is residential on the corridor.
And deep lots too.
And deep lots and primarily, and there's townhome developments that are on the corridor as well. The intent is that where there is residential, that it would stay, that zoning as it's in there now would remain. Should somebody come before whichever jurisdiction controls it and want to
Market
rezone
driven
it?
would be, market driven would probably be the biggest answer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So if a property owner came before whichever jurisdiction it was in and said, hey, we'd like to turn this into commercial, that would run through their process.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I know Lake Street continues to be kind of our Moby Dick that we continually try to hunt down and try to reinvigorate. And I think a lot of times the issue is this is a multi-jurisdictional quagmire. You've got the county that controls large portions of it, some of the most undesirable portions. You've got Hanover Park that has jurisdiction, Bloomingdale has jurisdiction, and we obviously have jurisdiction. I think it's very difficult when you drive down the street to say, why can't the village just make this look pretty? When we only control a small percentage of it and we're working or trying to work with our partners. And I think that's the whole idea of this overlay district is it helps us level the playing field and the standards. So we're all kind of reading from the same book. While we might have different interpretations and local control, which allows us to have our independence, it's going to allow us to really address Lake Street with a new tool that we haven't had in our toolbox before. I think staff has been super diligent about hunting down opportunities on Lake Street, and we've seen some great success stories, but I think the long-term ability of us to redevelop Lake Street is going to hinge on us working regionally. And, this was started in 2020. I think this was one of the best things we probably could have kicked off, because I think this is going to help us really make the progress that needs to happen on Lake Street happen. So thank you so much for all your work on it. I know it's like herding cats enough as it is when you do a project like this and add 4 different independent government agencies to work with. So I think this has been a really fruitful effort, and it behooves us to take this and actually implement it and to use it, because to not would have wasted all these resources over all these years. So consent from the board to move forward with it, or any questions? Move forward. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Best of luck with your future presentations. Next on our new business agenda is an update on the pedal porch and promenade. So Village Administrator Pulowski, invite you up to the hot seat or the hot podium. Those seats.
Thank you, Mayor. So before the village board is a preview of where we are with the design of pedal porch and promenade. It's almost, it's 95% probably ready to be advanced to the next step. And before doing that, which is the bidding out of the project, we wanted to review it with the board, preview it with you to receive your feedback, any input on it, and just to confirm the next step in the process being bidding, which is within the scope of professional services that the board has already approved. Timeline wise, we're likely doing, more construction next year than in 2023. But that would kind of all be driven by cost of the bids and just, the ability for contractors to do the work. But based on where we are in the process, it's probably looking at something done this year, with the bulk of it being completed next year if we advance forward with the whole project. So David, anything that you'd also like to highlight?
I would just highlight, obviously, the design from our last meeting to now has been modified. So in consultation with the engineering services that were done due to grade challenges, and also just us continuing to be cost conscious, some of this was scaled down a little bit. So the shade structure is different and has been designed in a more economical way. The porch for 8,000 miles, or the designated 8,000 mile seating, remains there, but it makes it more handicap accessible and easier from that side of things. We also made sure that the porch itself would not obstruct or do anything to diminish the mosaic. Otherwise, I think everything else is pretty much the same from what we had seen from earlier designs. You'll see the actual material choices that are being recommended that'd be a part of the bidding process. I think 2 things that I think is, just because we bid it doesn't mean that we actually move forward with it. That requires board action. So we don't know what the marketplace is going to come back to us. The estimate is on the higher end that we put in here, just to be conservative. And, we do have American Rescue Act, or Plan Act money that does need to be designated, to something before, it expires. So I think this is, something that's well within our ability to do, and that money has restrictions on what it can be spent on. So, good gift to the community from the pandemic, if you want to make lemonade from lemons, so to speak. So any questions or comments from the board? Pierkowski?
Thank you, Mayor Pulaski. I just have a kind of quick question on the colors and all these little design things. Those are still kind of up in the air if we decide to move forward. Like if we decide to go like with red instead of the pink, I just wanted to kind of confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, everything's open. From a color perspective, no specific color's been selected. And that is something we noted as we talked about with the architect, maybe getting a short list of colors, putting some stuff out there. We could talk about putting QR codes or something and ask the community to give input, but also the downtown merchants group. But there's definitely a color palette to this design, and the colors as shown fit within that current design and is intentional throughout the palette. So I think if there's a strong opposition to that, that should be raised.
Yeah, let your voice be heard now, I would say, rather than later. Obviously, we would get samples though, to Jason's point, so we can get community input. I would just say red is probably not a great idea, since red is associated with blood, and I don't want to cause alarm that we have giant puddles of blood on Main Street. So I think colors are obviously very sensitive, and we want to make sure that we choose the right stuff. So, but I would steer away from probably red, as much as we love it. Wayne?
Being red, green, colorblind, I don't really care. So.
We'll exclude you from voting on that then.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I will defer to people who can see it. I will like to ask, when 8,000 miles agreed to do this, do they realize they won't have a canopy? They won't be able to have outdoor seating during rain events or anything like that. Was that by plan, and are they okay with it?
Yeah, so we're still trying to schedule another meeting with the restaurant operator as well as the building owner to review these latest drawings, but initial concepts eliminated their canopy. And so this is keeping in spirit with that. I think we spoke about, depending on the people at the restaurant, they could grab something and sit out under the covered area. If they wanted to, maybe not receive service from 8,000 miles, but could take food out there. But those are the things we're going to review with them to get their feedback on this design, to see if there are any operational issues. But the original plan showed no canopy as well. So we're trying to get that meeting scheduled with them, just to make sure there's no strong objections from them, or if anything's changed since the last time we met with them.
And then basically we maintain it. We maintain the landscaping. We plow during the winter.
As we do today, I think they can obviously put up umbrellas if they want to for their tables and whatnot, but I think the whole idea is we didn't feel comfortable investing in putting a whole lot on their area. I mean, it'd just be consistent paving, and the plantings are adjacent to it as a buffer, but there's not like a lot of, there really isn't any infrastructure besides the fencing and the concrete that would be ours. Today, they're currently on our property. We have a lease agreement, and they have a very large structure that, love it or hate it, we have some input on, but not a lot of control over. So I think this shifts us back to a better position, I would feel, because that could easily be a different business tomorrow. We don't know.
Yeah, well, that's true. And then we maintain it, right? We maintain the plowing. We cut the grass.
Correct.
Village is in charge of all that. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Looks nice.
Yeah, I think it looks nice. Okay. Consent to move forward with the bidding process, and we'll see.
Yes.
Hopefully Lady Luck will roll the dice and we get some good numbers back. So
Great.
You've got our direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continuing on with new business, we have a update on the village logo redesign process. So our first item too, I would be remiss if I didn't mention from our community relations coordinator, Emily Glomko.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. All right, so after the success and broad implementation of the Centennial logo, the time is right for the village to pursue a more permanent visual identity that strikes the same balance of charm and modernity that the Centennial logo does. So Mayor Pileski reached out to the same graphic artist that did the Centennial logo earlier this year. I've been overseeing the process since then. So we've received initial design concepts from our graphic designer, and we launched a staff-facing poll in May to get staff feedback and try to figure out a direction for the logo. The three concepts we received were, one was a single rose that focused on a more traditional appeal. The other design focused on a stylized R for Roselle. And the one that won everyone's approval, oh no, did I? I don't know. I think that maybe saying that this was the
Oh, there you
first
go.
one jinxed me a bit, but user error. In any case, the logo that by far won the staff poll is the one that you can see on the screen, which is a refreshed take on the current 3-rose motif. Now, it's important to note that this is just a concept. This is not the final logo design. We're going to be working with the graphic designer to help refine this. I'm just going to gesture. I don't know. Anyway. So on the left, you can see some of the samples that our graphic designer provided to help us envision the logo. One piece that came up right away with this is that the color scheme will need to be adjusted. We love a good Roselle red, that's not a problem, but the Park District and the library both use blue in their branding, and we need to stand out from the other municipal entities, so that's something that will be updated. The other thing that we need to work on with our graphic designer is tweaking the floral elements. Staff feedback suggested that they appear to be more like tulips than roses, and we are called Roselle, not something else. So we want the tulips to be a little bit more easily identifiable. One change that we have already asked for and received, you can see on the right, is the updated typography. The O in Roselle is better balanced with everything else. That was a point from staff feedback as well. And like I said, so that is the logo type. That means that is the version of our logo that has nothing else in it. And that does actually have good uses for branding. And you can picture too the fountain at Sparkle Lot or the water tower with our current logo type on it. So we have already started to roll this out a little bit. On the left, you can see we have just ordered some new stock for our water bill using the final logo type. And on the right, you will see the ad that we submitted to the Daily Herald. We'll be taking a full page ad out in celebration of the fact that Roselle has been named a top pick in their annual Reader's Choice Contest. We are a top pick for best city/town to live. So this will launch the marketing efforts associated with that. So let's see. Yeah, so to summarize, the Village of Roselle's new logo will transition us from the current logo that's been around for a very, very long time into something that is more reminiscent of the Centennial logo that we have used throughout 2022. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have on the logo rebrand process at this time.
Any questions or comments from the board?
You know why it's 3 roses? We should tell everybody, right?
Yeah, the 3 roses are for our 3 commercial corridors, Main Street, Nergy, and Lake Street. And there's 2 temples, which were people holding up the roses originally, so.
That's right. And I will say too that with every design that we received from the graphic designer, there was meaning behind each of them. This one specifically, the one that we are going to continue refining, he purposefully arranged the roses in more of a bridge to kind of help signify this more aspirational idea that, you know, we're bridging gaps, we're working together. So. Any other questions that I can answer for you at this time?
Or even feedback, I'd say, because I mean, we're still working with the artist to kind of refine it. I think there's the 3 roses are not going anywhere. The classic logo, it's well ingrained in our DNA. I think as we continue to market the village and continue to do things, it's important to have a kind of a modern focus forward. So this is just us kind of continuing the evolution. I think even the topography of it's very similar to the font that we've had. And so I think it's a natural evolution of everything that we've done. And that's why we've got a community relations coordinator, right, to help us massage this. And I think having someone new in the role is helping us kind of take a fresh perspective, but also someone who's absorbing a lot about our community to help us kind of move a couple steps forward. So.
Is the plan to redo the signs at the end, the gateways to the community, once we finalize this?
Minister Dabrowski.
Yeah, so there is actually money in this year's budget to start that process. And so, yes, I think eventually the intent is to get this out in the community in those areas.
Is there an easy way to get those lit?
All a part of the, I'd say all a part of the study there. And I think
Likely would be part of the new design, would maybe be an internally lit if it's conducive to that. But yeah, I think our intent is to light them up.
I would say though, I don't think we're going to go out of our way to, obviously a lot of these signs are at a point where they need to be replaced, but I think this will be a gradual progression towards it and a natural kind of evolution. We won't be taking things out early before their end of their lifespan to replace it just because of the rebranding. So.
Thank you.
And it's
On the note of timing too, we are expecting to have revisions probably this week from our graphic designer to see an update to the floral elements. And based on his timeline, we could see the logo redesign done at the end of June. That could change. There's no cost implications if that timeline changes, but if all continues to go swimmingly, we could be wrapped up with this in the start of the summer.
The taste of Roselle.
We had been talking Founders Fest originally, but yeah, theoretically, that is possible.
Everyone happy with the evolution so far? No concerns? All right, well, we'll look forward to the update then. Thank you. All right, moving along. So we did rearrange things a little bit. So any other business for discussion only from the board? Seeing none, is there any village board public comment? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to convene executive session for the purpose of
So moved.
discussing personnel, selection, appointment of a specific employee and real property acquisition?
So moved.
Is there a second? Could we have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Delapenna.
Aye.
Trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
Trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. We will be adjourning from our regular meeting from executive session. No action will be taken. No final action will be taken. One of these years I'll get it right.